The door to Alvis's bedroom was never supposed to be open at night. Nicholas Roberto had established rules for his household with the same iron precision he used to run his empire: doors locked at 10 p.m., security rotations every 4 hours, and absolutely no one entered his son's room after bedtime. The boy's routine was sacred. Disruption meant meltdowns that could last for hours. Yet tonight, at 2:47 a.m., a soft golden glow spilled into the hallway from Alvis's cracked door. Nicholas's hand moved instinctively to the Glock holstered beneath his silk robe as he approached. Someone had breached protocol. Someone would pay for this. He pushed the door open silently, a skill perfected over 40 years of life, the last 22 spent in a world where the sound of a footstep could mean the difference between power and a bullet. What he saw made him freeze. Michelle Ford, the maid he'd hired 3 weeks ago, knelt beside his son's bed. Her dark hands were clasped together, her eyes closed, her voice a gentle murmur that seemed to wrap around the room like a blanket. But it wasn't Michelle that stopped Nicholas's breath. It was Alvis. His 7-year-old son, the boy who couldn't bear to be touched, who rocked himself to sleep every night, who lived behind walls Nicholas couldn't scale, sat cross-legged on his bed, his small hands folded in clumsy imitation of Michelle's posture. Peaceful. His son looked peaceful. "And Father, I'm asking you to speak to Alvis in the way only you can," Michelle's voice carried through the room, soft as velvet. "Help him find the words trapped inside his beautiful mind. Let him know he's loved fiercely, even when the world feels too sharp, too loud, too overwhelming." Nicholas's throat tightened. Beautiful mind. The doctors had used words like severe, nonverbal, low-functioning. His ex-wife Victoria had used the word broken before she'd fled to Paris, leaving Nicholas alone with a son he didn't know how to reach. But this woman called Alvis's fractured perception of reality beautiful. "And Lord, I'm praying for his father too," Michelle continued, and Nicholas's hand tightened on the doorframe. "Cover Nicholas Roberto. I know he walks in darkness, thinking shadows will keep his son safe. I know he's built walls so thick around his heart he's forgotten what it feels like to let someone in. But show him that love isn't the weakness he fears. Show him his son doesn't just need a protector. He needs a daddy who can hold him without being afraid." Something cracked open in Nicholas's chest, sharp, unfamiliar, dangerous. Alvis suddenly made a sound, a soft, melodic hum that Nicholas had learned meant contentment. The boy leaned forward, and Michelle opened her arms without hesitation. "You're safe, baby boy," she whispered against Alvis's dark curls. "Right here with me, you're always safe." Alvis's small arms wrapped around her neck. Nicholas stepped back, his heart hammering. His son never hugged anyone. Never. Yet here he was, clinging to Michelle Ford like she was the only solid thing in a tilting world. Nicholas retreated to his office and pulled up the security feed. Michelle was laying Alvis back down, tucking his weighted blanket around him with practiced care. She kissed his forehead, something Nicholas hadn't dared to do in months. Alvis smiled. Actually smiled. He should fire her immediately. She'd violated protocol, broken into his son's space, and somehow seen through every defense Nicholas had spent decades building. But as he watched her settle into the chair beside Alvis's bed, clearly intending to stay there all night, Nicholas Roberto felt something he'd thought died the day Victoria left. Hope. What do you think Michelle saw in Nicholas that made her pray for him? Share your thoughts below. Down arrow. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you are hooked in and ready to enjoy the story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments section where you are watching from, because tomorrow I'll be giving you an interesting story such as this one and you don't want to miss it. Now, let us begin. The morning after, Nicholas summoned Michelle to his office. "You entered my son's room without permission," he said, his back to her. "Yes, sir, I did." He turned then, and Michelle saw exhaustion carved into every line of his face. "You think God listens to prayers said in a house like this?" Michelle met his gaze without flinching. "I think God pays attention to every child who needs him. And I think he's been waiting for someone to pray with Alvis instead of just for him. And what makes you qualified to decide what my son needs?" Nothing makes me qualified except being willing to sit with him in the dark." She paused. "When's the last time you did that, Mr. Roberto?" The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. "I know Alvis arranges his airplanes in the same pattern every day. I know he hums when he's happy, rocks when he's overwhelmed," Michelle's voice gentled. "I know he looks for you every morning at 7:30, right before you leave for work. He watches your car disappear, then lines up those airplanes all over again. Like if he gets the pattern right, maybe you'll come back different. Maybe you'll stay." Nicholas's jaw worked. "Get out. Your son hugged me last night. Did you know he could do that?" She looked back at him. "He's not broken, Mr. Roberto. He's just waiting for someone brave enough to meet him where he is." Alone in his office, Nicholas pulled up last night's footage again, watching Alvis smile in Michelle's arms. He wouldn't fire her. He'd watch her. Learn what she knew. Figure out how she'd unlock the door to Alvis's world. And maybe, though he'd never admit this, figure out if she could unlock the door to his own heart before it calcified completely into stone. The crisis came on a Tuesday. Michelle was in the garden with Alvis when Marcus, Nicholas's head of security, appeared. "Miss Ford. Bring the boy inside. Now." Inside the mansion, chaos moved with military efficiency. Nicholas stood in the foyer like a general preparing for siege. His eyes found Michelle and Alvis. "Upstairs. My private quarters. 3rd floor, end of the hall." In Nicholas's bedroom, Michelle settled Alvis near the window with stones to sort. 20 minutes later, Nicholas burst through the door. "Is he all right?" The desperation in his voice was unmistakable. "He's managing." "What's going on?" "Someone leaked the location of this estate to the Castellano family." He looked at Alvis, something breaking in his expression. "They know about him now. My son just became leverage. Every enemy I've made now has a target. So we leave. There is nowhere else. The Castellanos have reach across 3 continents." He couldn't finish the sentence. "Then we don't run," Michelle said quietly. "We fight. You can't fight these people with prayers and good intentions." "No. But you can't fight them with fear and isolation either." She held his gaze. "Alvis needs you, Mr. Roberto. Not your security team, he needs his father." Behind them, Alvis made a small sound. Both adults turned. The boy was standing, looking directly at his father with naked longing. "Go to him," Michelle whispered. "He's ready. You're the one who's still afraid." "What if I hurt him?" "What if you don't?" Michelle moved beside Nicholas. "What if this terrifying moment is exactly when he needs you to be brave?" Nicholas looked at her, and Michelle saw everything he'd been hiding, the guilt, the love he was terrified to express, the man who'd built an empire because he couldn't build a relationship with his son. "I don't know how to be what he needs," Nicholas admitted. "Yes, you do. You just forgot." Michelle's hand found his. "But I think you're about to remember." Nicholas moved toward Alvis and knelt. For a long moment, father and son simply stared at each other. Then Alvis stepped forward and wrapped his small arms around his father's neck. Nicholas froze, his eyes wide with shock. His hands hovered uselessly. "Hold him," Michelle said softly. "Just hold him, Nicholas." And Nicholas Roberto finally let himself be vulnerable enough to embrace his son. Alvis hummed his contentment melody, and Nicholas buried his face in his boy's hair, his shoulders shaking with 7 years of grief and relief and love. This moment of breakthrough had made them all targets. Nicholas's enemies would sense the shift, would recognize that he finally had something he couldn't bear to lose. And that made him, for the first time in his ruthless career, truly vulnerable. Over the next 3 days, the estate transformed into a fortress. Additional security arrived, surveillance tripled, and Nicholas became a ghost, disappearing into his office for 16-hour stretches. But something had shifted. Now, when Nicholas checked on his son, he'd pause in the doorway. Sometimes he'd step inside. Once, Michelle found him sitting beside Alvis's bed at 3 a.m. "You should rest," she'd whispered. "So should you." "I'm staying close to Alvis." Nicholas had studied her in the darkness. "You're not afraid?" "I'm terrified. But fear's just a feeling. It doesn't get to make my decisions." One night, Nicholas led Michelle to a workshop filled with model airplanes, hundreds of them. "I started building these when Alvis was diagnosed," Nicholas said quietly. "Thought maybe if I learned about what he loved, I could connect with him. But I never showed them to him. Never had the courage." Michelle moved through the workshop, seeing years of hope and fear crystallized in miniature aircraft. "He'd love these." "You think so?" "Tomorrow morning, bring one to breakfast." "Just one." Nicholas looked at her. "Why are you doing this?" "My grandmother raised me after my parents died. She taught me that loving people is always a risk, but it's the only risk worth taking." Michelle met his eyes. "I see someone worth knowing, Nicholas Roberto. Beyond the reputation. Beyond the fear. Just you." The air between them felt electric. Nicholas stepped closer, his hand rising to touch her face. "You should be careful," he said softly. "I'm not a good man, Michelle. I'm not here to judge your past. I'm here to help you build a different future." His thumb brushed her cheek. "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple. But it's possible." The moment broke when Marcus burst through the door. "Sir, someone's been watching the estate." Local police intercepted 2 men with cameras and detailed surveillance logs documenting everyone who enters and exits. Nicholas transformed instantly. "The men? Hired muscle." "But sir, the logs include detailed notes on Miss Ford. Her schedule, her routines, even her visits to church on Thursday evenings." Michelle's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number: "Beautiful service at First Baptist last Thursday. Your voice carries." Another text: "Does Nicholas know you pray for him by name? We wonder what else you say when you think no one's listening." Nicholas read the texts, his jaw clenching. "They're escalating. Marcus, double her security detail. Nicholas. If anything happens to her, there won't be enough of them left to identify." His voice carried absolute certainty. Later, Michelle found Nicholas at his window, staring at his guarded kingdom. "I shouldn't care this much," he said. "I shouldn't let you become this important." "But you do," Michelle said softly. "Don't you?" He didn't answer. The truth was written in the tension of his shoulders, the way his hands fisted at his sides. Michelle Ford had become the one thing Nicholas Roberto had sworn never to have again, something precious enough to destroy him if he lost it. The next morning, Nicholas had breakfast with Alvis in his son's room. A Model P-51 Mustang sat beside Alvis's plate. "I built it," Nicholas said quietly. "Thought you might like it." Alvis examined the model with trembling fingers, then hummed his 3-note melody of contentment. "You can keep it," Nicholas said. "I have more. If you want them." Alvis looked up, making eye contact. Then he did something extraordinary. He climbed into Nicholas's lap, still holding the plane. Nicholas's arms came around his son without hesitation this time. Later, Marcus pulled Michelle aside. "You need to understand something about Nicholas Roberto. When he loves something, he becomes absolutely ruthless about protecting it. He's already made mistakes because of you, emotion-driven decisions that could get people killed." Before Michelle could respond, her phone buzzed with the threatening texts. Nicholas appeared in the hallway. One look at her face and his expression transformed into something lethal. "They're escalating," Nicholas said after reading the texts. "Marcus, get her into the safe room." "Nicholas, wait. They want me to know they can reach you anywhere." His voice was ice. "I'm calling a meeting with the Castellanos. Face to face. We settle this once and for all. But first, I need to get you and Alvis somewhere safe. You leave tonight." "I'm not leaving." "Don't." The word exploded from him, and Alvis stirred nearby. Nicholas immediately softened his voice. Don't ask me to risk you. I can't lose you too. The admission hung in the air. Too? Michelle whispered. My mother died because my father's enemies used her against him. I swore I'd never let that happen again. Never care about anyone enough to make them a target. He finally met her eyes. But you destroyed every defense I built. Michelle's heart hammered. Nicholas. I'm in love with you. The words came out raw, terrifyingly honest. Maybe it was the first night I watched you pray with my son. Maybe this morning. Maybe it's been happening slowly, every time you looked at me like I was worth saving. But loving you makes you a target, and I won't let what happened to my mother happen to you. Tears streamed down Michelle's face. You think sending me away protects me? I'm already in this. They already know I matter. Running doesn't change that. Then what do I do? You let me stay. You let me fight beside you. You trust that the God who brought me here can keep me here. Michelle cupped his face. And you stop punishing yourself for having the courage to love again. Nicholas leaned into her touch. I don't deserve you. Nobody deserves love. We just accept it when it's offered. Michelle smiled through tears. And I'm offering all of me to you and Alvis, if you're brave enough to accept. Nicholas kissed her, soft and fierce and desperate all at once. Alvis stirred between them, and they broke apart. I don't know how to do this, Nicholas whispered. Then we'll figure it out together. Marcus cleared his throat. Sir, we have a bigger problem. The texts were sent from inside the estate. Someone on the security team is compromised. The words hit like a physical blow. Find them, Nicholas said, his voice deadly calm. Find them in the next hour. As Marcus left, Nicholas looked at Michelle with eyes that held equal parts love and terror. I meant what I said. I love you. But that might be the most dangerous thing I've ever done to you. Michelle took his hand. Then we'll be dangerous together. What would you do if loving someone put them in danger? Would you push them away or hold on tighter? Tell me your thoughts. The traitor was Rosa, the head housekeeper who'd worked for the family for 15 years. They have my grandson, Rosa sobbed. Miguel. They said they'd kill him if I didn't cooperate. Nicholas stood like carved stone. Why didn't you come to me? Because you solve problems with violence. I couldn't risk Miguel's life. So you risked my son's life instead. Sir, Marcus interrupted, the Castellanos just made contact. They want a meeting tomorrow night. They're demanding you come alone. It's a trap, Michelle said. Of course it's a trap. But it's the only way to end this. Nicholas looked at Marcus. Arrange transport for Michelle and Alvis to the Vermont safe house. They leave within the hour. No. Michelle stepped forward. I'm not leaving you to walk into certain death. You don't have a choice. Yes, I do. And I choose to stay. Nicholas grabbed her shoulders. They will use you against me, Michelle. They'll hurt you to break me, and it will work. You're my weakness now. Then let me be your strength instead. But Nicholas had already decided. He kissed her, desperate, like a man saying goodbye, then nodded to Marcus. Get her out of here. 3 hours later, Michelle sat in the safe room with Alvis, watching feeds as Nicholas prepared to leave. Alvis woke and immediately searched for his father. When he couldn't find Nicholas, the boy's distress escalated. He ran to the door and pounded on it with small fists. Michelle made a decision. She called Marcus. Let us out. Miss Ford, I have direct orders. Alvis needs his father. And Nicholas needs to know his son is fighting for him. Open this door, Marcus. A pause. Then the locks disengaged. Michelle found Nicholas in the garage, loading weapons. He turned at footsteps, shock and anger flashing across his face. What are you? Papa. The word burst from Alvis, clear, unmistakable, the first word he'd spoken in 2 years. Nicholas froze. Did he just? Papa. Alvis stretched his arms toward his father. Papa, Papa, Papa. Nicholas crossed the distance and pulled his son close. Alvis clung to him, repeating the word like a prayer. Oh God, Nicholas breathed. You spoke. You called for me. He's been calling for you all along, Michelle said softly. You just weren't close enough to hear. Nicholas looked at her over Alvis's head, tears streaming down his face. I can't take you with me. Too late. We're already in this. We're already a family. Michelle placed her hand over his heart. And families don't abandon each other. Nicholas pulled her close, the three of them forming a tight circle. I don't know how this ends. Neither do I. But I know we don't face it apart. Then Nicholas made a call that would change everything. Marcus, new plan. We're not meeting the Castellanos on their terms. We're ending this my way. He looked at Michelle. But I'll need your help. Think you can teach me to fight with truth instead of bullets? Michelle kissed him. I thought you'd never ask. You want to go public? Marcus stared at Nicholas like he'd lost his mind. The moment I expose my operations, the Castellanos lose their leverage. Nicholas stood surrounded by his inner circle, Michelle at his side. I have documentation on every major criminal organization on the East Coast, including the Castellanos human trafficking network. You'd be confessing to decades of criminal activity, his attorney protested. Not confessing. Cooperating. Nicholas pulled up files. Complete cooperation in exchange for immunity and protection. It'll destroy your empire, Marcus said. I don't need an empire. Nicholas looked at Alvis. I need a life. Where my son can say Papa without me worrying someone will use that against us. Michelle understood. You give the authorities everything. In phase 2, we do a public interview. Live television, telling our story. A mafia boss seeking redemption, a woman of faith, and an autistic child finding his voice. Nicholas's smile was sharp. We become too visible to kill quietly. Over the next 18 hours, everything moved at lightning speed. Nicholas's attorneys negotiated with federal prosecutors. And Michelle prepared Nicholas for the most important performance of his life, being genuinely human on national television. Just tell the truth, she coached him. Don't minimize what you've done. Just be honest about who you were and who you're trying to become. The interview was set for the following evening on the nation's highest-rated news program. That night, Nicholas found Michelle praying in his chapel. What are you praying for? He asked. Courage. Wisdom. Protection. The usual. Are you scared? Terrified. You? Absolutely. Nicholas took her hand. But I'm also more hopeful than I've been in 20 years. That's faith, Michelle said. Believing things can be better, even when you can't see how yet. I love you, Michelle Ford. Whatever happens tomorrow, you saved us. Saved both of us. We saved each other. That's how love works. Alvis appeared, dragging his blanket, climbing into Nicholas's lap. Then, looking at Michelle, Mama? Michelle's eyes filled with tears. Yes, baby. I'm here too. Alvis hummed his contentment melody and closed his eyes, secure in the presence of the two people who'd built a family from broken pieces. Tomorrow, they'd step into the spotlight and face their enemies with nothing but truth and hope as weapons. But tonight, they were simply a father, a son, and the woman who'd loved them both back to life. The television studio blazed with lights, but Alvis sat calmly between Nicholas and Michelle, wearing decorated noise-canceling headphones, holding both their hands. The interviewer, Catherine Wells, wasted no time. Mr. Roberto, the country is watching. What do you have to say? Nicholas took a breath. My name is Nicholas Roberto. For 22 years, I've run a criminal organization. I've laundered money, bribed officials, operated outside the law. I've hurt people. Destroyed communities. He looked into the camera. And for most of my life, I told myself it was necessary. What changed? Nicholas looked at Alvis. My son has autism. When his mother left us, I convinced myself I was protecting him by building walls. But walls don't protect. They just isolate. I was so busy defending my son from the world, I forgot to actually be present in his life. Michelle spoke, her voice steady. Nicholas is here because he wants to do the right thing. He's cooperating fully with federal authorities, providing evidence that will help dismantle multiple criminal organizations. Including the Castellano family? Especially them. Nicholas pulled out a folder. The Castellanos have been threatening my family because I have evidence of their human trafficking operation. Evidence I'm turning over to the FBI tonight. Catherine leaned forward. You're aware you're painting a target on your back. I'm already a target. But now the whole country knows why. And they know if anything happens to us, where to look. The interview continued. Nicholas detailed his crimes with unflinching honesty. Michelle spoke about faith and redemption. And Alvis participated, showing his airplanes, making eye contact, demonstrating he was a real child, not just a talking point. Within an hour of the broadcast, the story went viral. #redemption is possible trended nationally. The public attention created a spotlight too bright for enemies to operate within. But at 11 p.m., as they returned to the estate, Marcus received a call. Sir, 3 vehicles approaching, heavily armed. Nicholas moved Michelle and Alvis to the panic room, but this time, he went with them. Whatever happens, no one fires unless fired upon, he told Marcus. 20 men surrounded the estate, led by Victor Castellano himself. Marcus met them at the gate, cameras recording everything. You're trespassing, Mr. Castellano. The police are already en route. Victor smiled. I'm simply here for a conversation. In the panic room, Nicholas watched the feeds. He's stalling. The answer came when FBI vehicles screamed onto the property, followed by police. Within moments, the estate was flooded with federal agents. Nicholas smiled. Marcus called them an hour ago. We've been waiting. Victor Castellano's face transformed as agents surrounded him. The entire country watched as he was arrested on weapons charges, trespassing, and, thanks to Nicholas's evidence, federal trafficking indictments. There would be no quiet retaliation. Just very public justice, witnessed by millions. When the all-clear was given, Nicholas led Michelle and Alvis out. An FBI agent approached. Mr. Roberto, we'll need you for debriefing. I need 1 hour with my family first. The agent looked at them, then nodded. 1 hour. When they were alone, Nicholas pulled both Michelle and Alvis close. It's over, Michelle whispered. The danger is. But everything else is just beginning. If you'll stay. If you'll build that life with us. Michelle kissed him. I'm not going anywhere. Mama, stay, Alvis said firmly. Papa, stay. Family, stay. Yes, baby, Michelle laughed through tears. Family stays together. Outside, the sun was rising on a world that looked entirely different. Nicholas Roberto's criminal empire was dissolving. His enemies were in custody. His secrets were exposed. And somehow, impossibly, he was free. 6 months later. The small house in suburban Vermont was nothing like the estate. Just a 3-bedroom ranch with a yard for Alvis to play in and neighbors who baked cookies. Nicholas Roberto, now Nicholas Ross, thanks to witness protection, worked as a logistics consultant, using his skills legally. The pay was a fraction of what he'd once made, but it was honest money. Michelle had returned to school, studying early childhood education with a focus on autism. Her blog about parenting special needs children had attracted thousands of followers. But the real miracle was Alvis. Papa, look. The boy ran while holding a drawing. Airplane. I see it, buddy. That's incredible. Nicholas hung it on the refrigerator beside dozens of others. Alvis's vocabulary had expanded to over 50 words. He made eye contact regularly. He'd started attending a specialized school where he was thriving. "Mama home?" Alvis asked. "Soon." Michelle's car pulled into the driveway. Alvis ran to meet her, and Nicholas watched as she scooped their son into her arms while he laughed, a sound that had once seemed impossible. That evening, after Alvis was asleep, Nicholas and Michelle sat on their porch, watching fireflies. "Do you miss it?" Michelle asked. "The power, the wealth?" Nicholas considered seriously. "Sometimes. But then I come home to this, to you, to Alvis, to a life where the biggest crisis is buying the right juice boxes, and I realize I never had anything real before. I had control, but not connection. Power, but not peace. No regrets? Only that I didn't change sooner." He pulled her close. "That I wasted years being afraid when I could have been living." They sat in comfortable silence until Michelle spoke. "I've been thinking about something. Alvis calls me Mama, but legally, I'm still just..." Nicholas slid onto one knee. Michelle's breath caught. "I don't have a ring yet. And I don't have wealth or power to offer. But I have a heart that belongs completely to you. A son who loves you as much as I do. And a future that only makes sense if you're in it." He took her hand. "Michelle Ford, will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her face. "Yes. Yes to all of it." They kissed as fireflies danced around them. The wedding was small. Marcus, Rosa, friends from church, and Alvis, who served as ring bearer with serious concentration. When the pastor asked if anyone objected, Alvis spoke up clearly, "No objections. Mama and Papa getting married is good." The church erupted in laughter and tears. 3 years later, Nicholas and Michelle stood before Congress, testifying about rehabilitation and redemption in the criminal justice system. Alvis, now 10 and significantly more verbal, sat in the gallery drawing airplanes. Nicholas's cooperation had led to the dismantling of 6 major criminal organizations. His testimony had freed dozens of trafficking victims. And his story had become a symbol of hope for countless families. After the testimony, a reporter asked Michelle, "Do you ever regret taking that job as a maid?" Michelle looked at Nicholas, at Alvis, at the life they'd built. "Regret it? No. I prayed for guidance, and God led me to a man and a boy who needed to know they were worth saving. He led me home." She squeezed Nicholas's hand. "And sometimes home finds you in the most unexpected places." Nicholas pulled both Michelle and Alvis close, this family forged in fire and sealed in love. He'd once believed power came from control, that safety came from walls, that strength meant standing alone. Now he knew better. Real power came from vulnerability. True safety came from connection. And the greatest strength was having people you loved enough to change for. As they left the Capitol building, Alvis between them, all 3 holding hands, Nicholas finally understood what redemption meant, not erasing your past, but refusing to let it define your future. Not being perfect, but being present. Not hiding from love, but running toward it with everything you had. And in the end, that made all the difference. What's one thing you believe could change everything in your life if you were brave enough to try it? Share your thoughts. I'd love to hear your story of courage or transformation. If this story touched your heart, moved you to tears, or made you believe in second chances, please hit that subscribe button. We create emotional stories like this every week, tales of love, redemption, courage, and the beautiful messiness of being human. Your subscription helps us continue bringing these powerful narratives to life. And who knows? The next story might be exactly what your heart needs to hear. Subscribe now, and let's continue this journey together. Because everyone deserves a story that reminds them they're not alone.